Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. It's Women's History Month, and I'm looking at some of the composers and teachers that have really influenced me. Well, today I'd like to just draw our attention to the French classical teacher Nadia Boulanger. So, for a little context, Nadia Boulanger spent most of her career teaching out of her apartment in Paris. She lived to be 92, died in 1977, which would have meant I theoretically could have studied with her. And if I had, I wouldn't have been the only one. She was friends with Stravinsky. And if I tell you that she taught composers as diverse as Philip Glass and Quincy Jones, it would give you just a taste of the breadth of her influence. She was a composer, and her dad was a composer. In fact, her dad was a prize-winning composer. He won the Prix de Rome. Here's a photograph of her conducting later in her life. It's the photograph I took from the NYTimes article, which is excellent. I won't give you a lot of facts and figures. There's tons in Wikipedia about her. But one important thing is that her dad, a great French composer, and her mother was Russian royalty, a princess. So she comes from a very strongly defined European classical tradition. And that was part of her teaching her whole life. Here she's pictured with her younger sister, Lily, who actually was a composer as well, and eventually herself did win the Prix de Rome. These young women were born in the end of the 19th century and lived through the First and Second World Wars. During that time, they both traveled to the United States. They taught here. Here's a photograph of Nadia with her fellow finalists for the Prix de Rome. She never did win it herself. In fact, later on in her life, she said, "I've written tons of useless music." But what was really true about her was that her keyboard skills and her breadth of knowledge made her an ideal teacher and conductor. In the States, she was literally the first woman conductor in many large philharmonic orchestras. Here you can see her at the podium, that giant viola in the background. And another photograph of her conducting. She was friends with Stravinsky, as I said, and there you can see him, that classic Stravinsky focus, right? Well, I think the sort of single thing that stands out for me about Boulanger, and there's lots written about her and an excellent video, I'll show you a couple of clips in a moment, is her attention to detail and rigor. She, like a lot of French literary figures and just French philosophy and art, was a proponent of le mot juste, the exact right word, and the exact right note. Her teaching focused on clarity and intention at every moment. And this is the thing that I admire the most about her philosophy of teaching. That philosophy of teaching was supported by a deep breadth of knowledge. She's reportedly able to play stuff from the entire sort of history of Western music, and probably had a deep knowledge of world music as well. Listen, I'm going to run a couple of clips from an excellent documentary about her, and I'll notate it down at the bottom.
Vous vous souvenez quand Cocteau dit « Les bonnes larmes ne sont pas tirées de nos yeux par une page triste, mais par le miracle d'un mot mis en place. Le mot qu'on a choisi, qu'il faut mettre ce mot, et aucun autre mot ne pourrait le remplacer. »
Est-ce qu'à votre avis, le don est lié à la qualité de l'homme? Ou bien est-ce qu'un grand musicien peut être aussi un homme médiocre?
Ah, pas médiocre, on peut être un homme affreux, on peut être un homme bourré de vices qui paie. Et les vices paient pour les faiblesses humaines, mais pas médiocre.
Remarkable, right? It's nice that it's subtitled. The entire documentary runs to about an hour, and that's actually been cut down. And you can find it on YouTube. I'll link in the description. Here's a picture of Quincy Jones, and he's talking about his teacher, Nadia Boulanger. He writes, "My former teacher in Paris used to tell me, Quincy, there are only 12 notes, and until God gives us 13, I want you to know what everybody did with those 12. Bach, Beethoven, Bo Diddley, everybody. It's the same 12 notes." And also a little story from Philip Glass, and this is from Glass's really terrific autobiography. I'll just read this because it's crazy. After proffering his 20-page manuscript, Mademoiselle, as she was known, placed it on the piano's music rack and cast her eyes over the densely written pages. At a certain point, she paused, drew breath, and inquired after his health. "Not sick? No headache? No problems at home?" "No, Mademoiselle Boulanger, I am really fine. Would you like to see a physician or a psychiatrist? It can be arranged very confidentially." "No, Mademoiselle Boulanger." She wheeled her chair around and screamed, "Then how do you explain this?" She had found hidden fifths between the alto and the bass part, a heinous crime. I personally am not quite so rigorous about my fifths, but there it is. Every note in its place. I recommend the New York Times article about her and her sister as well. Good read. Well, Nadia Boulanger, maybe one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century, perhaps someone you'd never even heard of because she wasn't a super big public performer, but she was a teacher that influenced thousands of composers, conductors, arrangers, teachers ourselves. Very grateful for her presence here. Well, I hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe and hit that button to be notified when I do my next video. I'll see you next time.